All right, hi everyone. Today we are talking about rider symmetry and straightness. And a few weeks ago on a Zoom call with many of you, I noticed that one of your biggest struggles is symmetry and straightness, getting your horse straight, getting yourself straight. And this is because all of us humans and all horses have little innate asymmetries. And it's really important to become aware of these asymmetries and work towards improving them, because otherwise they will get worse and worse. So today we're going to talk about keeping your shoulders and your knees straight. And I've found that with many of my students, some of the asymmetries originate from either the shoulders or the knees not being level. Now, the tricky part with asymmetries is that everything's connected. So if you have a bad shoulder, it's going to affect your seat, it's going to affect your legs. If you are right hand dominant and not very good with your left hand, it's going to affect your connection, which is going to affect your shoulders. So that's the tricky part, is identifying the source of your asymmetry. So to start with, we're going to talk about your knees. And this horse, as I'm standing here, he loves to push me off to the left. So I always have to think about stepping in my right stirrup. So what I mean by your knees being straight is, if you can imagine, if I drew a line and cut my horse from my right knee to my left knee, this line should be parallel to the ground. So the height of your knees should be the same. And if you think about this, your knees and your thighs kind of create an A-frame, which keeps your horse underneath of you. So it's really important that your A-frame is straight, because if one knee is higher than the other and the A-frame is crooked, it's gonna open the door for the horse to fall one way or the other way. So let me demonstrate that a little bit as I'm riding here. So I noticed that with most riders and most horses, because most horses fall to the right, what happens is that the rider, like your horse wants to fall to the right. So in an attempt to fix this, you are clamping with your right leg, you're holding with your right leg, your right knee comes up over the saddle, and your A-frame is now crooked. So let me demonstrate that to you, this crooked A-frame. So I'm going to come towards the camera so you can see here that my right knee is much higher than my left knee. And so my seat is falling to the left, and this is going to allow my horse to fall even more to the right. So what we need to do is we need to straighten out our knees. So I need to get my right knee down to where that line between my knees is parallel to the ground. And this is going to actually allow me to be more effective with my right leg. So now I'm really focusing on feeling that my knees are even and feeling that my horse is even underneath of me. Okay, so the second most common place of asymmetry is shoulders. And I find that a lot of my students have either one shoulder that wants to be more forward, or one shoulder that wants to be more back, or they collapse to one side or another. So again, similar to your knees, if you draw a line from your left shoulder to your right shoulder, that line should be horizontal and parallel to the ground. You should not have one shoulder higher than the other. So if you have one shoulder higher than the other, what that does is it collapses your whole side. So if your left shoulder wants to be high, your whole right side collapses. And when you do this, it creates an asymmetry in your pelvis. So like here, I have more weight on my left seat bone than on my right seat bone. Now what I've found with my riders is, if you don't address the shoulders and you just try and say, okay, sit even on both your seat bones, without fixing this asymmetry in your shoulders, it creates a really funny twist in the rider's body. So like if your left shoulder is higher than your right shoulder and you try to put weight on both of your seat bones, it creates a tension and a weirdness in your body that's really bad. So that's why it's important to pay attention to this line of your shoulders. Now the shoulders are a little more complicated than the knees, because in addition to being able to collapse one side or the other, you also can rotate. So when you rotate your shoulders, you need to be able to rotate your shoulders for turning. So if I'm going to turn to the left, my left shoulder comes a little bit more back and my right shoulder comes forward. Now, when I turn this way, I don't do this. So I'm only rotating on one axis. When I turn to the right, my right shoulder comes back and my left shoulder comes forward. Many riders have an easier time rotating their shoulders in one way or the other. So if you kind of put your hands straight out to the side and you see about if you can keep your seat in the saddle and just practice being able to rotate. And for me, it's definitely harder for me to bring my left shoulder back because of an injury that I had. So that's another really important thing to keep in mind. So let me show you this while we're riding. And for sure, you know, I've always thought that it's most important first to consider your pelvis and to get your seat bones straight in the saddle before, like that's the beginning of getting straight. But the more that I'm learning about straightness, the more I realize that your shoulders being straight really affects your pelvis. So sometimes you need to first address the straightness in your shoulders. So let me show you. I'm gonna go to the camera here. So sometimes what I see with riders is they'll kind of ride like this with one shoulder higher than the other. And what this does is it puts a little more weight on your left seat bone and the horse can kind of escape to the right. So I'll show you that. Sometimes it's easier with this shirt to show it going away from the camera. So a lot of times riders I see do this, one shoulder higher than the other, and that really affects your seat. So it's important to really think about getting your shoulders level. Now I'm going to go up to the canter just because it's a little easier. So let's talk about your shoulders on circles. So if I'm going to ride a circle to the right, my shoulders should stay level. I have a tendency to kind of collapse to the right like this, and my left shoulder comes up and my right shoulder drops down. So this is not correct. When you turn a circle, you should not do this with your shoulders. Now also when you turn a circle, you should not do this. So here you can see my shoulders are turned the wrong way. So my shoulders are turned left and I'm trying to get my horse to turn to the right, and it makes it really hard to turn. So the proper alignment for your shoulders on a right-hand circle is that they're on a level plane. So your left shoulder and your right shoulder are the same height, but your right shoulder is just slightly behind your left shoulder. So let me change direction and show you that to the left. So the reason that this is so important is that if your shoulders are not correct, it really has a big impact on your seat and your ability for your seat to follow the horse. So my tendency on the left-hand circles is to do this because I have an old injury with my left shoulder. So I like to have my left shoulder in front of my right shoulder all the time. Now when I do this, which is incorrect, you notice how my horse kind of counterbends a little and falls a little in. So I have to really focus on the left circles about bringing my left shoulder back and letting my right shoulder come a little bit in front of the left shoulder because my horse's shoulders are turning on the circle line. So that's really important. Now, obviously, again, I'm not doing this. I'm not collapsing to the left, but I'm definitely bringing my left shoulder back while maintaining even height in my shoulders. When I go straight ahead, now my shoulders are even. So you should see that X on my back should be nice and perfectly straight. And I'm keeping that evenness in the corners. So that's just an important thing to keep in mind as you're riding, is that your shoulders and your knees are even, and that line between your shoulders and your knees is what allows your pelvis, which is in between that line between your shoulders and your knees, it allows your pelvis to stay straight and even in the saddle and properly following the motion of your horse. So comment below. I'm interested to see if this is helpful to you guys and what little asymmetries you have in your body, because we all have them. And it's so important, if you want your horse to be straight, that you have to be straight, because it's not fair to expect your horse to be straight if you're not straight. So I hope that video was helpful. Thanks for watching. Boy, Don Carlos. Okay, the end.